is a video game found on your front page, we are unsure of its origins. It is your job to complete the testing checklist before claiming it as balanced, or, if you choose to, you can throw it back onto your front page where you found it and forfeit playtesting. Please make your choice now. You have chosen to proceed with the testing checklist. Remember, use the developer-issued channels to alert if your game is buggy or unbalanced. You may view the video you had clicked on and go ahead with the introduction process. Begin audio prompt in 3, 2, 1.
Well then, it sure has been a minute, has it not? It's true, I have long abandoned this spot, but I found it quite fitting to be used as an opportunity to go over projects, including this game, and talk about them in detail, almost like making some sort of devlogs. Now, of course, while I will still go into the game presentation of today, I know most of you, if not all, have no idea what I'm talking about, and I'll use this starting point as a way to give you all a quick rundown. Critical Skirmish Tower Defense, or CSKTD for short, was a very old game project that gave its own shot as a tower defense game based on Critical Strike, something that probably isn't new to a lot of you. With that being said, as time went by and as I'll detail later, lots have changed to build itself as its own game, following its own path, rather than trying to be related directly to any other games of such kind. Now, I know, if you've ever seen anything on this channel, it may look a bit awkward given the amount of past CTD stuff from back in the day. But during all of that, not only had this game been an abandoned idea, but I also had no connection to it, so don't overthink yourself too much. What's definitely gonna stick out as a bit funny, however, is my old April Fool's video, which, despite the mention of it being as a joke in the video itself, description, even comments, to this day some people think I was serious. Oh well, I guess. However, putting aside the worthless past of this channel alongside, any of the jokes, I decided it'd be fun if I went over and explained my process with this game, how development goes, and what exactly there is to care about in the first place, at my own pace. Before I get into further detail, I want to mention early on that the game is soon after this video, more specifically August 17, going to open up to some public testing in which we'll gain some feedback and test the very early variant of the game. Now, obviously, a lot is limited until the grand main release later, but I still wanted to give anyone watching this a quick word that they can follow us along or even play the game during this short testing period. And you can join us through the Discord link that I'll either put in the description or my pinned comment. I know when it comes to these sorts of games, the problem is always quite obvious. What will feel so different, what can be actually interesting, is it really worth my time, and so on. I fully understand this, and it's quite a natural response. I hope that besides my quick tell of this moment that you're hearing right now and will be hearing for the rest, I will become able to describe things in enough of a way and provide enough ideas as we go to hopefully clear up your confusions and put things in a good light. Of course, this won't all be done in one go. The purpose of these videos is definitely going to be for people that are specifically interested for these sorts of talks, discussions, and obviously to know things about the game. With this cleared up and out of the way, it's time to finally start. Assuming most people are unaware, this is not the game's first few moments of development. If we turn back the clock, let's say to 2022 or 2023, there are still a few remnants of its past from back in the day, and back then, the game was a lot more different. For starters, being a simple project that came out of nowhere, it's easy to say that the road it had ahead for itself was never gonna be anything impressive. In fact, if your first impression is somehow of what you might recall, chances are it'd be quite low, as the concepts put out and the overall direction of the game wasn't really being overly unique or having a complex thought process behind it. Some of the more important notices to make, however, is the fact that not only was the team very slim and didn't have much of a budget, which is, quite important for a game, but I, the dear person talking about the whole process of this game right now, wasn't even working on it back then, outside of, it being allowed to suggest some ideas, but not related to the team itself. I wasn't part of it. So, what really makes a difference in the old formats of this whole ordeal? For starters, as anyone could notice at first glance, the old models are something you can probably get a quick laugh out of now, as with time the quality, and overall concept of them as a whole, has improved noticeably. Sure, keeping things simple, especially for the Critical Strike style, is pretty important, and we want to ensure that alongside still being decently flexible and pushing it later to bigger limits so we can have something more pleasing to look at, it is by all means still important to try and make things more organized. Better looking even if simple, but more importantly, not a random mess thought about overnight. So, We're trying to put our minds to work. Assuming I had displayed or have been displaying some examples for people to see, I think it's safe to say this is one easily noticeable change, but of course it doesn't end there. Anyways, leaving aside the talk of the present, because that's not what we're here for, another aspect is just how the game was structured. The direction of its modes was not exactly deeply thought into, even if some concepts have existed. The proper road going from A to B just seemed messy, and this applies no matter how you interpret it. Of course, it is understandable of why it was such an innocent small concept, as the team wasn't overly large. Once again, there wasn't a budget to go off, and most ideas were a spark of the moment addition, at least in most cases. So if you want a quick word to describe and sum up most of the idea I'm giving, it was very unprofessional, to say the least. Again, this was understandable for the time, as no high goal and no much planning was put into stuff, but nonetheless the result was gonna leave to be desired. With all of this being said, just because so much was over the place and the real big constant world building wasn't there, that doesn't mean it was some random game with nothing to it. One of the main goals, which I will be going into later, is of course to try and make something stand out while the player can easily recognize the things they're selling themselves into. And they may see some familiar faces, given it is, after all, based on Critical Strike. That doesn't mean there's no room for unique implementation. Again, because we're talking about the past here, and, I can't yet elaborate, but there was always a charm and a will in there which clearly showed a desire to have little things, or bigger in later cases, to stand out, make itself a bit more fun, try and find its own place and direction with whatever ideas or design preferences it will have, and so on. So, while the game did end up rotting for a while and things never went their way back then, later on all of this potential was used to pitch it back up, kinda like how I'm trying to tell you all about it right now. So, just how much was done before? Well, as some funny videos still can showcase through some leaks, such as the little CSKTD archives, a video of which you can find below from my man, an ordinary epic gamer, someone you might recognize if you were into CTD back then. Some of the models and plant towers were definitely there. While the game had map concepts, a lobby, the main structure of it being similar, but now it's up to standard, and some functioning buttons and whatnot, the gameplay wasn't there by any means, neither was it constant down, and neither was it in the middle of properly functioning. So, outside of the base idea and some execution, alongside some attempts at finding out what should be done going ahead, the game didn't really have too long of a path until its inevitable finale. With that being said, even if a thing or two might have been left out so I don't ramble over nothing, for the most part, the past wasn't that complex and didn't have too much to hold us out of plenty of basically outdated models. So, with the past finally out of the way, I think it's about time we move to the present. Well then, here we finally are to discuss the current game at hand. A long time after the old had met its end, one day we're given the sudden opportunity to make a pitch of sorts and be convincing that the game does have potential, and around this time is where I stepped in myself, at first to help pitch, and later becoming the co-director of the game as a whole. After presenting the idea and doing my best to put it out as nicely as possible, we were obviously overjoyed to hear the fact that yes, indeed, the game stood out enough to give it a shot. Now, don't imagine us walking through the doors of the largest company on this planet or something like that, because needless to say, that will never happen. But nonetheless, we were finally given something to work with and provided with the opportunity to seek proper help and find the right people in order to put a more quality game together. As you can imagine, before we discuss the other roles, potential troubles and everything else, the main topic I can go into is what I work on myself, which is the entire game-based structure, planning decisions, balancing, and anything else you can fit into those words that I cannot think of right now whatsoever. Obviously, the first priority is to set a base, an idea I'll work on, build the world of the game so additions and other things to structure yourself on makes more sense. Think of the themes, concepts to be added, and in the end, overall why decisions happen, especially when in relation to player experience. There is a lot of things to go over, some being serious notices, some being me describing ideas, and other things being fun behind the scenes of other elements, the thought process behind them, and so on. You probably are getting tired of me repeating that. Stuff like this and much more will all have designated videos on them, as the devlogs should focus on covering the other elements and being fun to watch if you're ever curious about how in-depth things can really go. First and foremost, the game does have plenty of characters that the player can choose to talk with and interact, giving the world you're in somewhat more life. Now, as writing is something I find very fun and that I worked towards for a while, I decided to give each character their unique personality, lines of dialogue, and slight connection and potential lore to look into, although do keep in mind some of it is, as of now, a bit older. While these are nice fun additions and they give the environment a lot more life outside of the custom way the UI is done and the friendly approach in the lobby as a whole, it is still important to acknowledge the gameplay itself, since this is where most people will go straight to anyways, and you know, it's kinda the main point of the game. As such, it was important I find fun themes for the modes, then fit them into the world I was building for the game, give explanations for stuff, concepted the enemies, and so on. One of the important aspects of this is to make sure the new player isn't overwhelmed, but still add a thing or two in there for fun. A core issue with many games actually is the desperation to come off as simply unique, no matter what it takes. A lot of concepts can sound fun and can be fun easily too, and very early on, but that does not mean it won't lead to a mess, them going unused, or, you know, just having a horrible pacing with them. With this being said, I did my best to work on the game's past concepts for the first mode, as they nicely fit into a simple yet welcoming mode, with a few things to look forward to still, and of course holding back its own challenge even if made to be easier. But the focus of enemies as a whole, as it can be started to be seen in the second mode, is making more of them come off as a bit unique, whether through the way their traits will benefit them, or simply their fun gimmicks. Other than just standing and killing towers, buffing and debuffing all around, it's fun to work with concepts in order to make them stand out more, feel, you know, just like their own threat, and shine with the little mechanics they may hold. So you look at enemy and you'll think, hey, I will probably remember this guy because he was very annoying, or anything fun like that. Of course, other than just the enemies, I made sure the towers are nice as well. Naturally, they tend to be different based on, you know, being for the ground, cliff, or maybe just being base support, but that didn't mean that they have to stop there. Even if this isn't gonna be seen across every tower always, for the most part they tend to, and even one of your starter towers has this by the way, have at least one gimmick in their attack, you know, a passive, an ability in order to spice things up. But as you can expect, not all abilities will just be buff buttons that you can press, right? And you know, some may come with downsides, making for a more strategical use. While sometimes what I mentioned can be noticed either more or less, even a small tweak can help just find your experience ever so slightly more enjoyable, and you know, it gives the player some extra control over what they're doing and how they can or should play. Speaking of enemies and towers, much like with the characters, adding to the world you're playing in, I of course decided to do the same for every tower and enemy. While I'll detail this feature at a later date, some of you might be familiar with the concept of an almanac, a bit like how PvZ had it. With this being implemented, it helps me further give everyone a personality, some funny attributes, write fun jokes and descriptions, and still have it act like a proper guide to understand what your abilities, enemies, or their traits might do in detail. And that is exactly what you can find in there. Once you've unlocked them, you can go click on your desired tower or enemy, be met by a fun render for them, a quote, and a short yet fun description to look at. Now, of course, this isn't just done for the sake of it, as I do like to give more character to what otherwise seems like a lifeless aspect of the game, and give them more background, especially if we have, you know, future uses for them. Matter of fact, no matter how cool the enemies may end up being, or, you know, the towers, games do have this bad habit of stopping there and making them look like just a random thing came up for a mode of opportunity, with no real thing to attach you to, you know, slightly more to their world at all. And despite lore being attempted before, unless you just settle for whatever and don't really care, it is often easy to see what is done as a quick example of, yeah, maybe they'll enjoy it, don't overthink it, you know, just for the sake of being there. Obviously not trying to paint this as the next Mona Lisa, but instead, you know, of painting it's a ton of words, especially since it is kept simple, but nonetheless, it is a fun addition, that's the main goal to say here. And yes, as I've been probably hitting, the game will have lore behind it, which won't be hopefully shoved in your face, and instead slowly ventured through at a nice pace with slight hints and more to come to it afterwards, you know, bit of this here, bit of this there, and you know, I want to make sure it feels fun to both play and also look into the world you're playing, all while not being an obligation. Lastly, when we discuss terms of additions to make the game so more enjoyable, while a lot is for later and I can't fully discuss things for now, I can talk about some other fun additions. Of course, you can expect more maps to give you more rewards, and winning is by far very enforced if you wanna, you know, optimally get more currency, and there are also multiple types of quests. ranging from daily with both personal and global tasks out to the bounty section where you can find more higher goals that will probably be done as you play for longer, and eventually reaching one of our NPCs, having a special selection of them too, but I can't really detail that for now. However, just know it'll feel a bit unique, and some down the line might give off the impression of an achievement, you know, as a goal you have to go out of your way for to complete, just a fun little challenge like that. As per usual, this, alongside other small things and future additions, which I won't mention in advance, will hopefully work towards just making the game feel like it gives you, you know, more of a choice and more flexibility overall. And with that, I think it about sums up some of the details of the game's history as a nice blend with actual descriptions and mentions of in-game features, you know, and the planning for them. Of course, things can go more in depth, and that will happen for when the next few videos will come out for their specific things in question. But for now, we can move on to our last segment of the video. Well, now, here we are at the last, probably most unpredictable part of the whole video. The game does obviously have a lot of things already planned for it, as I like to think ahead and make sure the road we go in is always thought of in advance for as much as I can do. If you're watching or playing the game through public testing, which as of when I'm recording that is right now or in a few days, you know, it opens, you should know obviously some of the content is kept out and definitely limited. However, not only are the requirements for the main release already planned, but we've got a pretty decent roadmap ahead for what's to come. This ranges from last main modes of the game to maps getting not only another difficulty but also another special section where you can play their unique modes with, you know, entirely new waves and enemies rather than just the base modes on a new map. New progression additions, towers, and side modes, which again I can't talk about for now, but I really do hope and think most players will find it quite nice if we get there. One more important addition for me to make is the worrying about exclusivity as a whole. Now, I know there is an argument to be made about how having some exclusive stuff throughout your journey can be nice, and I don't promise entirely against it. Overall, we do want to make sure that not only does old content not go unused and never with a purpose again, but also that new players don't feel like they're missing out on a world out there that they couldn't participate for. So, with that being said, a lot of things are usually gonna have room to return, and when it comes to arguably the most important part, the towers from potential events, yes, they're planned to find a way to stay in the main game too. Of course, it will be a harder requirement, and the original owners might get a compensation of sorts, you know, just as a simple skin to prove their original status. In the end, everyone should have a fair shot at obtaining towers, given they are the main progression of the game. Not only that, but keeping things exclusive makes you have to make sure that the towers can't remain too good, or else you're gatekeeping top tier towers, whereas with this decision, this problem can be put to rest. Lastly, an important aspect of keeping a game alive is to talk monetization, since I know players tend to fear this aspect as well quite a lot. Much like the usual, there are ways to cut some corners and, you know, help support development by buying yourself head starts, like, you know, currency or whatever. Yet some things still will remain exclusive to just playing and actually progressing, so you can't buy your way to everything. Furthermore, we're mostly gonna try to, you know, put it in spots where you're not gonna be gate-kept from features, but anyone willing to can help themselves a little, coming off as harmless for the most part. And in the end, I want to also mention that anything in terms of side additions that are not core gameplay will probably have alternatives to be obtained through normal grind as well, so, you know, you have the option to buy it with Robux or currency on aspects that I deem quite important, unless they're entirely just not relevant enough for the normal player to care whatsoever, which, you know, maybe you shouldn't worry about that then. All of these small decisions should hopefully not have anyone feel underwhelmed. In the end, as we go ahead, depending on what fate has in store for us, we will love to expand more and more on previous concepts, make the world of the game a lot more fun for everyone to think of and look into, and onto what we have, and develop onto the more complex and fun ideas we've been thinking of in the background. Some of these probably will appear sooner than later. And so, our little trip down history, present, and a look into the future comes to a conclusion. This video should probably be seen as a test, as I have not done any other structuring examples before, and the next videos will definitely be different and sometimes might feel like a way to hear me ramble about fun details and thoughts I might have that the rest probably wouldn't care about. Either way, if you did actually stick to the end, I hope you found this somewhat fun to look into. Hopefully it was nice and grabbed your attention, at least a little bit. Given I do have most control over how things go, I'm always open for questions, feedback, and anything of that kind. I should clarify I'm not the owner, but you know, I still have control over things. I find it nice to be able to talk about all that and what's in my mind, and you know, to go over the way things come to be and whatever else I could say right now. I'm losing my words. But yeah, this is also, if you're still watching, hopefully you are, this is also the first video that I've kind of structured on a script I've written, which while it does help me feel a bit guided, it does also guarantee that I will stumble upon my words a lot. And not only that, but I've realized now that I also sound a bit like I'm reading off of something, because I didn't give myself too much flexibility. I wanted to make sure that whoever is watching this is just gonna like get the answers they're looking for, rather than going into a thing where I can ramble myself. But I think the next devlogs or whatever I'll make going onwards, unless it's something important like this, probably will just have me, you know, be myself. Nothing too crazy. Gonna talk out of my pure mind on the moment. Not like this wasn't written by me anyways, but you know, it'll probably feel nicer. Such as I'm talking right now, because I'm not reading off of anything anymore. But yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed, and I hope to see any of you in game as well. It'll be fun, and I know this is just the public testing, but this still is a start, right? Wishing everyone the best, and yeah, see you next time.